Welcome to our third edition of our Book of a Month Club here at the Pari Center. Today we have with us dear friends of the Pari Center who have been to Pari many times, David Schrum and Caroline Pawluk, but they're also dear friends of our family as well. So it's great to have the two of you here with us today, and thank you very much for being part of this series. So Caroline has been involved in dialogue for over 30 years and has presented online for the Pari Center on David Bohm dialogue. David Schrum is a quantum theorist whose larger focus has become inner exploration and group inquiry through dialogue. He had a long connection with physicist David Bohm and his work on consciousness. Schrum has been involved in local and international dialogues of various kinds for 40 years. And with that, I will hand it over to the two of you. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Well, it's such a delight to see so many familiar faces. So I'm just seeing my face now, but that's not quite such a delight. But anyhow, it's good of you to come to share with us this exploration. And thank you so much to Eleanor and the Pari Center for what you do for all of us by providing these locations for us to come together and to talk things over. So today, just a cautionary note. There are medical things going on here, and if I get a phone call, I'm going to have to interrupt and get it. So anyhow, Herman Hesse's novel, Steppenwolf. It was published in 1927, almost 100 years ago, and it still is very much current. Why is it so durable? Now, I'd say it's really because it's about the universal human spiritual journey to wholeness. And so I think that probably is something that has brought us together in this context. And that is the approach that we'll be taking to the novel. So I'll read a bit from notes. No, I won't go into the becauses. Steppenwolf diverges greatly from New Age narratives that ignore shadow and purport to leapfrog to light. Rather, as do Buddhists, ancient mystics, and inner explorers such as Jung, Steppenwolf points to the need to pass through the underworld of the psyche in order to reach that which lies beyond. It is important to approach the novel as a poetic writing, as Hesse points out. He says, "Of course, I neither can nor intend to tell my readers how to understand my tale. May everyone find in it what strikes a chord in him." So it's in this light that Caroline and I will offer our own take on Steppenwolf. And in the breakout rooms and the dialogue together, we very much invite other voices. So do you have a slide up, Caroline?
I'm gonna put it up now. Okay.
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 Okay, can I go to the next slide now? So this is just an overview of what we're doing. First of all, we're going to look at Herman Hesse's life, basically. And this is important because most of his writing and, well, all of his novels are essentially tied to his experiences. They're really biographical. And then we'll look at themes of inner exploration. And what we'll do in this multifaceted, multi-layered book is, of course, just pick out some that we feel are important or that we feel would be important to the group. And so we're going to look at things that are of universal interest to spiritual explorers. And then there's a dialogue participant. And let me just say a word on that in advance. If you haven't read the book, recently, then don't worry. Don't avoid the breakout groups and so on, because it's really the journey, spiritual journey that we're discussing, and I'll fill us in on details of the book. So next slide, please. Okay, this is what happens when you stay up late doing things. You don't have the slides in the same order. Anyhow, oh yeah, I'm supposed to introduce Caroline. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, medical issues going on. I was up most last night. Anyhow, so Caroline, please talk to us. Tell us about Herman Hesse and his life.
So welcome everyone. We're going to be looking at Hesse's life only because, like David said, he is an autobiographical writer, and a lot of his story, which means that a lot of his stories focus on himself. He didn't write historical novels or things like that. He wrote about his life and about the settings that he grew up in. So the best thing for us to do is to start off with his life, and I'm just basically saying the same thing here. He was interested in self-discovery and self-realization. And to a great degree, his life was, or his novels were fragments of a great confession. And that comes from Goethe, which he really loved. And so, yes, before we go into Steppenwolf, in order to orient ourselves, to understand how Steppenwolf came to be, we have to look at his life. Okay, so first of all, Hesse was born in 1877 in Kulf in the German Empire. It was a picturesque town. He could walk 5 minutes out into the country in either direction. It was beautiful, a beautiful setting. His family were loving. They were deeply religious. His father, Johannes, was a pietist, which is a form of Lutheranism. And he was in India as a missionary, teaching there for a number of years, only 3 years, because the weather wasn't good for him. So he came back to Germany, and he came back to this building. On the main floor in this building was a pious publishing house. He was assistant director to Professor Dr. Gundart, and Professor Gundart had a daughter, Maria, who was recently widowed and had 2 sons. They married after 2 years, and Hesse came along after that. They lived in the upper 3 floors of this house. Now, Professor Gundart was a missionary as well. He was a scholar. He was in India for quite a number of years. Maria was born there. So they had a lot. Hesse's childhood was very diverse. It was very unique. It created in Hesse a very different kind of character compared to the Germans, that, the regular Germans in the bourgeois 19th century Germany. So here I'm going to read what Hesse wrote about his childhood. So he said that rays from many worlds intersected in this our parental house. In it, people prayed, read the Bible, studied, researched into Indian philology, and played music. Buddha and Lao Tzu were familiar names. Guests arrived from many countries, bringing with them the aroma of distant places, strange traveling cases of leather and plated bast, and the sounds of foreign languages. I'm going to emphasize this idea of foreign languages because both his mother and father spoke English, and they spoke English so that the children couldn't understand. And the grandfather spoke many languages. It was a very unique place. I'm going to jump here. Scholarship and fairy stories lived cheek by jowl. Hesse's imagination was inflamed by stories. He loved fairy tales. He loved myths. His mother was born in India, so she knew a lot of stories, and Hesse was living off of this, and it was quite unique for him. This is the family, minus the 2 stepbrothers. They probably, at this point in this picture, moved on to school or something. So Hesse was a very good, industrious, intelligent student. I mean, his background, this is his grandfather, who Gundart, who was a scholar. He actually was writing or compiled a dictionary on Indian dialects. So there was so much, and they both, the father and the grandfather, had huge libraries, and Hesse was encouraged to go into them and read, and he started reading very young and diversely. So at the age of 13, now I just have to say that Hesse was not a good child. He was very troublesome. He's strong-willed. The parents didn't really know what to do with him. So at the age of 13, partly they sent him away to school, at a boarding school, and partly because he was to get training to apply for, or to write the scholarship in order for him to get into, or the examination to get a scholarship to go into the Maulbronn Protestant Seminary, which was an amazing school. Now, here Hesse realized that he did get into Maulbronn, and he realized that there was no path for him as a writer, and that this is what he wrote, but I think it was more than that. I mean, he was in a strict school. He didn't like authority. He bucked authority, did not like it at all. So he was not a good fit for him. So let's see what happens next. He I don't know if you're seeing this upper part. I just have to get rid of this. So Hesse ran away. He was there for 6 months. He ran away. He was missing overnight. He left after lunch one day, and a huntsman found him and brought him back. Now, as punishment, he was sent what he called the dungeon, which probably was a dungeon. He was fed water and bread. Was not a good thing for this child at this time. He fell into depression. He had a breakdown of some sort. He was either expelled or he was brought home. There are contradicting stories there. When he got home, his parents did not know what to do with him. They had a friend, Christoph Blumhardt, he was a theologian. He was a well-known exorcist and a faith healer. So probably they thought that Hesse was possessed by some demon, and they hoped to get that out of him. It didn't work out for very well, because Hesse attempted suicide. Blumhardt said, I can't work with this child, and he was sent home. So for 3 years, Hesse did various things. He tried school again, didn't like it. He tried an apprenticeship, didn't work. He ran away for several days. He was missing. Again, his parents were completely distraught. And finally, he did go into an apprenticeship for 1.5 years. He hated it. It was a clockwork manufacturer, and he stayed there 1.5 years. But after that, he was getting tired of it. And this is what he wrote to his one of his teachers, who he didn't mind the strictness, just as long as they respected him as a person. That was his big thing. He did not like authoritative figures. So he writes, bit by bit, I am now at last regaining peace and serenity and mental health. The evil times of anger, hatred, and suicidal thoughts are now behind me, but I owe to those years, the gradual strengthening of the poet in me. So he knew what he wanted to do. And at age 18, Hesse decided that he would find an apprenticeship for himself at a bookstore. And this, we're talking booksellers, different from today. I mean, they did bookbinding, they did publishing, they did everything. Yeah, you knew it was a 3-year apprenticeship. He stayed there 4 years in Tübingen. He found this position himself. And at that time, it was a thing to do. If you were an aspiring writer, you would go into a bookstore, and something would happen. Now, he's writing at this time, but he's working 12-hour days, 6 days a week. So he didn't have much time, but he started writing poetry. He published, and he's on the move. Now, he did leave Tübingen, and he went to a bookstore closer to home, and had more time. So he did travel a little in between. So here he's written He writes Peter Kamenstein. It's a complete success and a bestseller. And he has time now to, he can leave his job, and he marries his girlfriend. For the most part, Hesse is an introvert, a loner. He did start to go out in the later years of his apprenticeship or his book selling period. And so he married Maria Bernoulli. And at this time, Tolstoy was a big thing. Everyone was moving to the country. It was, back to the land. So they found a house in the country, and they had three sons there. But things were unraveling between the two of them. Maria, or Mia, as she was called, wanted to go back to Switzerland in 1912. So they moved to Switzerland. Hesse thought it might revive their marriage. And he involved in writing. Now, he just didn't write novels. He edited books. He reviewed books. He wrote poems, he wrote stories, he wrote short stories, he wrote fairy tales. He's just constantly writing. Like, just for instance, he reviewed 1,000 books in a 3-4 year period, which is amazing, plus all of his other work. So just to emphasize, the marriage between Mia and Hesse is not working very well. And the outbreak of World War I creates unbelievable stress for Hesse. Because he has access to writing, he declares his opposition to the violence that's happening. He's in Switzerland, but he still feels, he is a German citizen, and he feels that he owes something to them. So he writes about it. Now, other people wrote about the war. They were against it, but something in the German mentality, they did not like what Hesse said. So there was a violent words that came to him, violent threats. It was very difficult. And from the outside, he was under attack. In the inside, there was growing discord with his family. His wife was in and out of the sanatorium. And then his youngest son had meningitis. It was touch and go. Mia decided to stay with him day and night, which wasn't good for her mental health. So, and then Hesse's father died in 1916 suddenly. And that Hesse thought was a stable and balancing force, and a family was broken. Everything was broken. Mia went into the sanatorium for a lengthy time. The youngest son, or the oldest son, was sent to a family friend, and the two boys were put in a home. Now, Hesse is broken as well, and he goes into to Sonnenmat Sanatorium. And here, at first, they check him out. Physically, he's okay. They think it's a mental issue, so they send him to a Jungian psychologist, a psychoanalyst, Joseph Lang. This was life transforming for Hesse. What Lang did was he introduced him to Jungian psychology and to Gnostic doctrine. And for Hesse, who's an imaginative, who did not want to ever leave his childhood mind, he was against breaking his will. And he just flowed with it. He flowed with Jungian psychology, with Gnostic doctrine, and he was transformed. His understanding of himself was transformed. Essentially, he went through a purgation and a synthesis. And what came out of this was his next novel, Damien. Now, Damien is completely different from anything he wrote before. He followed the German romantics before this. Now he's writing, well, you can see from the cover, it's quite dramatic. It was such a change. And it was written that it was with fearless honesty and progress of the soul through the states of life that Hesse wrote in this book. And he chronicled that. And it was a huge success. The thing was that Hesse did not publish under his name, first of all, because he was so sensitive to criticism. That was one of the reasons. And also it was so different. He sensed it was different. The young people after the war took to this book. They loved it. And then when they found out that it was Hesse, they thought, well, how could this old man write? He was 40. How could this old man write about us, about our mind? So I'm going to jump now. The next book writes is Siddhartha. It's 4 years later. Now, during the process of writing Siddhartha, Hesse, who is a constant writer, has writer's block, and he's incapacitated for 18 months. He falls into depression, and for this, he goes into analysis, but this time with Carl Jung. So here he is. He's in the middle of writing Siddhartha, and he goes into to analysis. Now, what Jung does for Hesse, I mean, I don't know if you people know anything about Jungian psychology, but Jung was interested in dreams, in reveries, in all of that kind of thing. Hesse took to this wonderfully. Now he felt that he didn't have enough knowledge to continue to write Siddhartha because it was the Eastern mysticism that maybe he didn't get enough of. Of course, now being an autodidact, he was a self-taught person. He went into learning about everything he could about psychology, about Eastern mysticism, about Gnosticism. He's really into that. And so with Lang, he had roughly 72 sessions. I don't think he had that many with Jung, but Lang freed his imaginative spirit. With Jung, he was taken deeper into a journey of self-realization. So he, with this new insight, Siddhartha, he finishes Siddhartha. It's published in 1922, and this is what is said about Siddhartha. In Siddhartha, with its magic synthesis, we have the most harmonious of Hesse's soul biographies in Oriental apparel. So next, we're going to jump to Steppenwolf, and that's 5 years later. I mean, he's writing constantly in between. So here we in Steppenwolf land, and the difference between Damien, Steppenwolf, and Siddhartha are all Jungian-based novels. They have themes of Jung's ideas, and I think if you take the middle of Siddhartha, which is the Siddhartha being a successful businessman and involved with the courtesan, at that part where he's suffering the pains of living in this world he doesn't want to live in. If you take that little part out, that is Steppenwolf. Although with Steppenwolf, it's much expanded, and we're into a surreal and dreamlike atmosphere. So of these two novels, Hesse said, some people can't understand that I could have written both Siddhartha and Steppenwolf, but they complement each other. They are two poles of life between which we move. Now, if I asked you all, which book would you want to, which one would be the most you'd be drawn to? It'd be Siddhartha. I mean, Siddhartha has, a nice story. It has an ending. It's a full story. Steppenwolf takes us into the unconscious. And I have to just say that Jung said in his, one of his memories and dreams and reflections, he said, my life is a story of the self-realization of the unconscious. And that's Hesse's life. And that's what Steppenwolf is. We'll go into that more, but that's what it is. So for the last 30 years of Hesse's life, he is settled. He is in a remote corner of Switzerland in Montagnola. I've been practicing saying that, and it's quiet. A friend and patron builds a house for him. He marries Nino. She's here, and in the picture, and he writes his final novel, The Glass Bead Game. It takes him 10 years. It's not because he's slow or because he's having trouble, but the course he took initially was that he wanted to write something about the life of a musician, the artist's life of a musician. That didn't quite work, so he went to The Glass Bead Game. And Of all of Hesse's novels, Damien, Siddhartha, Steppenwolf, and The Glass-Bead Game are the best known ones. And in 42, The Glass-Bead Game was published, and in 46, Hesse received a Nobel Prize for lifetime contribution in literature. Now, I just want to say that up to almost this point, 1946, Hesse is only known in the German reader, and it was only because of some American writers that wanted Hesse's novels to be published in English. So now, I mean, Hesse's almost on his deathbed, and there's this huge resurgence of his work in North America. Well, in the English-speaking world, because it was accessible now. So now we're going to move into or journey into or through Steppenwolf, and David's going to take over.
Thank you, Caroline. Well, and thank you for the life story. So what we're going to do now is just a very brief review of this multifaceted, multi-layered, complex story. And so what I'll have to do is just pick out a perspective on it that I'll follow. And so we'll highlight some aspects of it. Next. I'll say next for next slide, Caroline. Yeah. Okay. So here's Hesse's attitude. My story isn't sweet and harmonious like invented stories. It tastes of folly and bewilderment, of madness and dream, like the life of all people who no longer want to lie to themselves. Next slide. So this is just the briefest view, first of all, overview. So Steppenwolf is a surreal story of the spiritual journey of a refined, sensitive, ultra-intellectual man. And it mirrors very much the issues that Herman Hesse worked with, struggled with during his life. Next. So here's the story, and here's how we'll approach the story. So, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the storyline in 3 movements, just to make it simple. And for each movement, we'll look at both the storyline and the theme that Hesse brings out, or at least that I'm bringing out Hesse. And to show what we mean by a storyline or plot in the simplest way, I'll give an example of, say, we're writing a romance novel. So in 3 movements. First movement, boy meets girl. Second movement, boy loses girl. Third movement, boy gets girl back. So we're going to do that for Steppenwolf. We'll break it into 3 movements to make it fairly simple to look at. And for us, the movements we'll use are, firstly, the protagonist, the Steppenwolf, whose name, is Harry Haller. It'll be Harry in conflict. And then it'll be, we'll take Hermione tames Harry, and then Harry moves toward integration. So we'll do the storyline, the plot, that is, and then we'll look at the corresponding themes. So next, please. So the protagonist, Harry Haller, sorry, I was a short night last night, is a highly cultured aesthete, ill at home in the bourgeois world in which he finds himself and which he disdains. He feels isolated, as Hesse says, and I like the way he brings this out, like a lone wolf of the steppes that had lost its way and strayed into town in the life of the herd. I mean, he really captures a lot there, you know, that he's a solitary soul without kindred spirits. And he's in town in the life of the conformist bourgeois herd. This is very much the way that Hesse felt about his own life. So Harry struggles with aspects of himself. Well, just a second. Okay, we have a picture blocking it. I'll look to my notes here. Well, anyhow, so we're looking at a lone wolf that had strayed into town in the life of the herd. So such themes of bifurcation and alienation were prominent in Hesse's early 20th century world. Yeah, it would be the early 20th century when he was really starting to write. He was influenced profoundly by Nietzsche's thought on the conflicting dual impulses of passion and order. Similarly, Freud saw the human animal at war with civilization in itself. Yeah, so this is a theme of Freud's civilization and its discontents, which I guess is his one sociological work. Jung brought out a similar bifurcation and conflict as persona versus shadow. All of this is built into Hesse's Steppenwolf. So Harry is struggling with two aspects of himself, in a sense, two selves, superior man and brutish wolf, which are in continual enmity. And so he's identified with superior self, but he has this other aspect which sneers at it and, and says it's all nonsense. But then the superior man looks at the brutish wolf and disdains that also as crude and coarse and unworthy. So Harry is struggling with these two aspects of himself, and he's been at it for a long time, and things are just not going well. So he comes to a point where, in unbearable conflict, he resolves to kill himself. But before returning home to do the deed, he wanders into a strange, less than savory part of town. Here he enters a pub and meets a young woman called Hermione. So next slide. So this is the next movement. We have, first of all, Harry in conflict, and we have Hermione coming in and acting on him. So next slide in the storyline. Hermione understands Harry intuitively. Gently, she takes him in hand, gently mocks him. She pushes him out of character, as symbolized by making him learn to dance. And, like American dances, foxtrot and so on, which is particularly offensive to his superior European intellectual character. So she opens him to the receptive and the feminine within himself. She facilitates a release from the rigidities of his animus and his shadow, both of which control him as a superior man and the wolf. Harry's unraveling parallels the process of individuation described by Carl Jung. The aim of individuation is nothing less than to divest the self of the false wrappings of the persona on one hand and the suggestive power of the primordial images on the other. So a few points from Caroline's thesis on this. I'm going to quote you now, Caroline. As Caroline said. Oh, yes, next slide, please. Well, no, not yet.
Okay. Well, I don't know how to go back.
Okay, well, that's all right. So as Caroline says, as Caroline says, Harry step by step is purged of his rigidities, reluctantly, and he finds this, as Hesse says, disintegration of the personality to be exceedingly painful, almost intolerable. As Harry suffers this unraveling of the tightness of his life, he discovers the truth of his constructed self. It is a myth. Harry realizes that the source of his disorder is not the Steppenwolf. Rather, it is the respected foundation of his person, his persona. It is the elevated man. So Harry's going to move toward integration now, and he's going to do this in a sequence which becomes more phantasmagorical and hallucinatory along the way. It seems that they take a little bit of substance, before they enter into this exploration together, and so it moves them into an entirely different space, dreamlike, surreal, and quite fantastic space. Next slide. So this is the third movement of the storyline. And we have that through Hermione, her friends in their world, she opens to Harry an increasingly surreal, dreamlike journey, possibly drug-induced. I think it's probably certainly drug-induced, in which he enters the magic theater. It's a place of endless doors, each leading to an exploration of an aspect of the psyche. So, of these many, many doors, he chooses just a few, and explores themes such as sex, nationalism, death, and more. So Harry opens himself to a synthesis of the masculine within himself, the feminine within himself, which Hermione has awakened, and the wolf. Jung's animus, anima, and shadow is the way I see it anyhow. And in this integration, nothing is discarded. We're not killing the wolf or the superior man. All elements are drawn together toward a coherent movement of the whole, which I think Jung would call individuation. So we're going to just ponder just 2 points, 2 themes. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we're going to look at just 2 themes from this last part of the book, which really bring out, in this rather strange way that Hesse uses, the spiritual journey and its issues and depths. So 2 themes that Caroline and I thought would be good to go into are, firstly, the necessity of going beyond the me that I know and with which I identify. We've just spoken a bit about that. And secondly, the necessity, and this is even more challenging, of holding and perceiving all aspects of the psyche at once, all at once, denying none in order to integrate the whole in the synthesis. This is a common, a well understood, well, not understood, common at least theme in all deep inner spiritual explorations. So, and these 2 themes work together. So we'll look at them just briefly, and then have an opportunity to talk about this ourselves. So, firstly, next slide. So we're going to look at beyond identified self, and I'll give a couple quotes here by 2 notable authors. The first one is Caroline, and this is from her thesis. Herman Hesse makes an extraordinary and ironic point. He indicates that it is not primarily the shadow, a repository of denied and forbidden urges, that is the originator of psychological conflict. Rather, the problem is rooted in the personal self with which each identifies. Now, I think there's a real tendency, certainly there has been in me, to think, oh, the shadow, all the dark stuff, which is pushed out of sight. That's where the problem lies. Well, there's a lot pushed out of sight, and much of it is very rich. But also, what keeps me pegged in place in a limited psyche is the identity with which I'm working all the time. So that's a key aspect. And Jung says this about it: one cannot individuate as long as one is playing a role to oneself. You know, my self-image, my self-identity, that's really what I am, the way I think I am. The convictions one has about oneself are the most subtle form of the persona and the most subtle obstacle. So simply put, it may be that the me that I know, the me that I defend, the me that I correct, adjust, and try to perfect, the me that forms my psychological entity, the me that works to try to resolve all its inner problems, it is the source of the problems that it is trying to resolve. Indeed, that is an ironic point. So perhaps another approach is needed. And this takes us to the final theme, which points us to the integration and synthesis that resolves this challenge and which can lead to wholeness. So next slide. So again, this is just a couple quotes. First from Jung, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. So the things that we like and the things that we don't like, the things we call good, things we call bad, and so on, all of them are movements that are arising in us out of fundamental sources. And if we deny them and try and cut them off on the surface, then we never meet the roots. And so, I mean, like the root of my instinctual animal nature, which is full of fear and aggression and identification, withdrawal, and so on. That's built in. So if I want to pretend it's not there, or want to, long story here, it won't really work. So anyhow, Hesse goes at the same thing. Instead of narrowing your world and simplifying your soul, you will have to absorb more and more, and at last take up all of it in your painfully expanded soul, if you were ever to find peace. So to take up the whole, I mean, this is, really the ultimate point of all these journeys. To take up the whole, what does it mean? Those who have traveled this path tell us that it is to enter into and perceive the entirety of consciousness, all at once, in one moment, in this way to see. Now, it seems quite impossible, because clearly this is not a task that our rational, thought-based left brain can do. It can never see the vastness of consciousness all at once as a whole. Rather, it is the right brain that may, in an embodied sense, feel into the qualities and the unbounded movement of consciousness as a whole. I've kind of jumped in here, left brain, right brain. We can just take them as metaphors for the part of us that approaches things, left brain, sequentially, logically, constantly referring to its understanding and memory. And the right brain is being that aspect of us which sees by being and doing, embodying, participating in something, moving with it, being of it, being it, and in that way understanding it. So in David Bohm's metaphor, it is the brain acting more as an antenna rather than as a computer that works in accord with its own programs, that can participate fully, intimately, immediately in what travels through it. In this way, it perceives and embodies in a moment the movement of the whole. So in this last slide particularly, we've gone through an awful lot in a few seconds that would take us a long time to go into and develop and to explore together. So what we're going to, I'll leave it with that, at that. And we have all these seeds planted in us now. And we may work with these in any way that we want. We can bring forward what we've carried into the room altogether. And what we'll do is we'll break into breakout grooves of half a dozen each. We'll have we'll talk there. We'll get to know some people, and then we'll have a meeting of the whole.
Okay, thank you both. So we can open up the breakaway groups now. If you don't want to join, it's fine to stay in the main room, and then we will all join back together. How long would you like the breakaway groups to be for, David and Caroline?
And to
what do you think? 15 minutes?
Sure. Okay, so then we'll meet at 5 past the hour. We'll meet back here in the main room, and then we can open it up for question and answers, and we can talk about what went on in the breakaway groups. So David and Caroline, would you like to say any more, or would you like to open it up for question and answers?
I think we should open it up, right, David?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if anyone would like to talk about what was discussed in your breakaway group, please feel free to jump in now. And otherwise, if you have any questions or would like to discuss anything that was talked about in the presentation, you can use your raise a hand function that you can find under reactions at the bottom of your screen. And yeah.
I left my group accidentally too quickly, and Isabel was just going to say something, and I'm very curious about what she was going to say. Isabel, would you speak?
Yes, we were talking about integration and coming into wholeness, and I was saying that really it's necessary to come to the witness point, to the point where you can then really integrate both the relative mind of concepts and talk and the absolute mind beyond, that then we are one. Now that's just talk, but in practices, which there are many and we can choose them, to go into that stillness. And from there, because otherwise, at least for myself, I'm fooling myself an awful lot sometimes, to go into that stillness and then view things from there. That was basically what I was talking about. And I had said that I had my life has been studying this path. And I was on my way to become a education professor, and I had a car accident, and I went out of my body and experienced beautiful space. And I decided that was time there was nothing at university I wanted to study. I wanted to know who I was, what it was all about. I had very, very negative, difficult experiences in my childhood, trying to kill myself, so on. Once got put away. So I had that deep pine, and I said, okay, I got to know who I am. So I've been on a long journey, and that's about where I got to. Still practicing to be relaxed and still, and that's still working on it. And I'm so glad to hear in this group and hear this group. Very, very interesting. I have read the books, not all of them. I haven't read The Last Bead Game, and a long time ago, but I'll come back to them. This is very, very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Isabel, for coming in. Veronica, would you like to come in?
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, in my group, we had no time to pursue this, but we were thinking about how important it would be for young adults to understand this possibility of integration, not only at the personal level, but we were referring to the situation on the planet and the challenges that that they are going to face. And not only just this book, but the idea of being able to integrate whatever happens so that it's not the dualistic mindset of seeking revenge and violence for violence, but how to educate not only oneself, but to educate communities to understand this. I guess it's back to right brain, left brain in a way, but it might become even more complex than this. I don't know. We were just thinking about these ideas.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Veronica. Thank you. Valjean, I saw that you had your hand physically raised. Would you like to come in?
Oh, I just wanted to thank David and Caroline for such an amazing presentation. They went into a lot of research and reflection and depth of meaning, and I think it probably gave a lot of impetus to our group discussions as well, but it was just such a wonderful presentation, and I enjoyed it tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, would you like to come in?
Yes, I just wanted to say I was very touched by the fact that Harry's transformation came. He was about to kill himself through meeting a woman, the feminine part, and that he really couldn't have done it without her. He transformed her life. She was the touchstone. He couldn't have done it just by sheer willpower to integrate himself. And I remembered that Carl Jung also had a similar experience in the sense that he met a woman who was maybe kept out of the literature for many years. I was trying to think of her name. I remember her name was Tony. And then somebody said, oh yeah, Tony Wolf. And I'm looking at the coincidences there, Steppenwolf and Tony Wolf, because Tony Wolf really brought Jung into the world of Buddhism and Hinduism and Eastern philosophy, which was, I'm sure, a very integrative force for him. But also they were physical lovers as well. So there seems to be an interesting parallel between Jung and Herman Hesse in the importance of the not just dialogue, but physical presence with another woman.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for sharing that with us. Hugh, would you like to come in?
You're muted.
Yes, I would like to come in. I'm intrigued by the Buddhist element that has just been mentioned and indeed was brought in to Jung's thinking. For me, Siddhartha, the book itself, was my first journey into Buddhism before I went to live in Thailand for several years. Siddhartha was a central book for me. But at the heart of Buddhist thinking, and I would like to hear from Caroline on this very much. I hope we can do this before we conclude the session. The Buddhism wouldn't start with a process of integrating fragments and bringing together the fragments into the whole. It starts with the whole. The talk of integration makes the starting point the broken, whereas the starting point of wholeness, which is the Buddhist orientation, fundamentally is the awareness of the whole as out of which everything else flows or emerges. So I would be really interested to hear Caroline pick up on that, because I know, Caroline, you've been a student of Buddhism for many years, and that aspect has not been brought out enough in its influence, among others, on David Bohm.
So,
Caroline, would you like to come in?
sure, I'll come in. I mean, you know, Hesse he went through all of these things. He went through Buddhism. He never stayed in any one place. He went because after that he was into the Chinese way of thinking, and so he never stayed any place. The fragments of a Great Confession was a saying of Goethe's, which Hesse, these are stages in his life. He went through all of these. He was interested for a while, moved on. He flowed. He didn't let go of anything. He just moved through it. And I think in the end, we get a really, really good understanding. I thought he became friends with this book here is really interesting. It's by Miguel Sereno. It's just a little book, but it tells about the relationship between Sereno's relationship between Jung and Hesse. Sereno went to Chile. He was from Chile. He was an ambassador in India. So he would come and visit the two. And this is at the end of their lives. So we get the essence of who these men are at the end of their lives in this little book. And Hesse was free. It just seemed he was free, and not one thing held him down, not one idea, not Buddhism, not Taoism, nothing. He was just flowing. I mean, I was really surprised. I really got a good understanding of him, and Jung too. Of the two, Miguel says that he felt Hesse achieved something, found some peace, some inner peace. Jung was still looking. He was forever, and not that he wasn't without peace, but he was always trying to find more and learn more intellectually. He was more interested in the intellectual, whereas Hesse was, moving with the spirit. So I can't say too much about Buddhism. I'm not, a student of Buddhism. I love Buddhism. If I was going to be anything, it would be a Buddhist, but I don't know enough about it.
But meditation is your practice, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Caroline, for coming in, and thank you, Hugh. I'm going to invite now Glenn to come in.
Hi. Yeah, I would agree with the well, hello everyone first. I would agree with the speaker before me about coming from wholeness and not coming from disintegration, and try from disintegration to come to wholeness. And when I read the book, I was quite interested. At one point, Hesse writes that the universe doesn't know up and down, so the universe is undivided, and yet Hesse goes on to glorify thought, that fundamental process that essentially breaks up everything. And it's so I was quite astonished that at the end Hesse would use laughter or I'm sorry, humor as the fundamental process to integrate everything, and not absolute silence of the mind and the cessation of thought, or the transcendence actually of thought, which I think would be the point where you really transcend, or where you really become the whole, is when you stop thinking, because it's only thought that is divisive. That's the only thing that divides, that divides the universe. And I think humanity will have to learn to transcend it. Okay, thank you.
Eleanor, could I just say something here?
Please come in, Caroline.
So I just wanted to say that I don't know if you read the Glass Bead Game, Glenn, but there's a lot of meditation. Hesse was a meditator. So maybe perhaps humor was just a stage he was at when he was writing Steppenwolf, but he definitely moved on beyond that. He was a meditator. I think one of the reasons I like Glass Bead Game so much is because they practice meditation in the book. It was part of their world. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe also when we look at humor, we found a way to look lightly at what we know or think we know, and so on. We know, so we've loosened the shackles of getting it right and being right, and so on. So in that sense, it may be an important element, whether we do it through laughter or through just quietly, coming to realize. And I would venture that the silence is important, and also important is the subsuming of the whole. The silence is emptying the mind of the powers of the whole, the urges and assessments and so on. On the other side, we have to live in the world also. And we also need the faculty that embraces the whole and takes it in. So I just suggest that maybe they're both important. The empty mind and the open heart. They work together.
Beginner's mind.
Beginner's mind.
Manfred, would you like to join us?
Hey, Manfred.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so David and Caroline, how should I say it? I'm so amazed. I've read Hesse, I think, when I was 16, and I think I have read all the books, and I have read Steppenwolf 4 times, and had no idea, not the lightest idea, that this is a spiritual path. And today, I really have to read it again and see it, what it may be made with me in an unconscious way. And Hesse lived 30 kilometers away from Stuttgart, so I have been very often in Calv. It's a wonderful small city, very conservative, and so how could a being like him start in it's the opposite surrounding? It's and what I did most of the years was not integration. It was trying to meditate, trying to avoid, trying to live in 2 worlds. I lived for years in conflict. And today I've learned that it's not, we have to start with the whole, because when how could I integrate a whole in a part? So, but that's what I tried to do for years. And now I learned today that Hesse told me that, and I didn't understand it. Great, thank you very much.
And Manfred, you read it in the original German, which you're very lucky to have done, right? You read it in the original German.
Yes, I've read it in original German. You're right. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. Well, you'll have to reread it with a different outlook.
Yes, now I have to read it, really to read it again. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Raymond, would you like to come in?
Sure. What was interesting to me in this reading was the insertion of the treatise or the essay, the book that the man in the street who's advertising the Magic Theater hands him a book. It turns out to be a treatise on the Steppenwolf, and especially the last 4 pages. And to go back to Hugh's point about coming from the all, I just read a sentence. This is from the treatise. All births betoken the parting from the all, the confinement within limitation, the separation from God, the pangs of being born ever anew. The return into the all betokens the lifting of the personality through suffering till it reaches God, the expansion of the soul until it's able once more to embrace the all. So to me, Harry is a fragmented soul at the beginning of the novel. He's certainly better off at the end. He's not contemplating suicide. He's on the way towards enlightenment, but he's not there yet. But he realizes that the way to get there is by including everything. It's this idea of the all. It's the treatise that's very interesting because it's very different from the manuscript that Harry leaves behind and the introduction at the beginning by the nephew who lived next to him at his aunt's house.
Thank you, Raymond. Well, we don't have any other hands up. Caroline and David, would you like to say any more?
I would.
Please.
David, do you have something to say? Because I want to read a poem that Hesse wrote just before or about a year before he died, which I think sums him up.
Please do. Please do.
Okay. It's called The Raised Finger. And it goes like this. Master Zhu Ji was, so we are informed, of a quiet and gentle disposition, and so modest that he renounced totally both word and doctrine. For word is appearance, and he was scrupulously anxious to shun every appearance. When students, monks, and novices engaged in noble speech and in intellectual fireworks concerning the meaning of the world and the highest good, he kept silent watch, on guard against every effusion. And when they came to him with their questions, the vain as well as the serious, concerning the meaning of the ancient scriptures, concerning the names of the Buddha, concerning illumination, concerning the beginning of the world and its destruction, he remained silent, only pointing quietly upward with his finger. And this finger's mutely eloquent pointing became always more fervent and more admonishing. It spoke, it taught, praised, punished, pierced so peculiarly into the heart of the world and truth that with time, more than one disciple understood the gentle raising of the finger, trembled, and woke up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a lovely way to end, I would say. And I want to say that I really appreciate, being here in the presence of this really extraordinary group, insightful, heartfelt, really looking into these issues. And yeah, it would be wonderful if we had time together, few days,
Yeah.
Anyhow, yes. So I just wanted to say my appreciation to everyone. It's really just an extraordinary group that has gathered together here. So I want to thank you all.
And the fearlessness of your of taking on Steppenwolf.
Well, thank you both so very much. My appreciation to both of you for the time you took today to share all of this with us. And thank you everybody for joining us here today. And we look forward to seeing you again next month at our Book of the Month Club, and also tomorrow. We have another free event tomorrow, The Future Minds with Alex, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, everybody.